say that we are.
Let everyone know they're being recorded. What is happening, guys? Welcome back to the Bucher's Bachelor Boys Fantasy Baseball Podcast. I'm joined, as always, by my lovely co-host and current first-place team in the league. He loves Asian games. How you doing, Miles?
I love Asian. It's like, glob on. I don't know.
No, good to see you, buddy. And then we also are joined by one of our many Marks in the league, but this is probably the best Mark. Welcome, Mark.
Yeah, happy to be here. I don't know if I consider myself the best Mark in the league after getting to meet Mark Missigman at the draft. Super nice guy. He is in 14th place though, so I guess I am better than him. Yeah, excited to be here.
Yeah, pretty stiff competition there, actually. We'll let you guys duke it out this year for top Mark. But all right, we got a bunch to talk about, guys. Last time we were here, me, Kyle, and Griffin broke down your teams, gave you power rankings. We're not going to reseed all the power rankings. We're going to do that. Take too much time. But we are going to break down everybody's auctions, which I know you're dying to do. I know it's fun to have the auction, but probably the best part of your season, after when we tell you if you're good or not, is if we compliment your picks or not. So without further ado, let's break down some drafts. I feel like we've got 2 days of ball in. And like I said, Kyle's winning. Why don't we just start with King Globlin? And I'm going to try to share my screen.
Best of the best.
Let's see if I can show you guys the Globlin roster.
A little birdie told me that stolen bases help.
Ooh, John. He got like multiple stolen bases, didn't he?
Sorry. Oh, sorry. What's that?
He had
at least one.
He had 2 stolen bases. He had one the first game, and then I was actually we're recording here on Wednesday the 19th, and so I was up before the game started this morning, and so I listened to the whole thing, and it was 3 balls. It was a 3-0 count, and he stole second. Like Roki Sasaki was just throwing nonstop balls, but I'm like, perfect, birdie. Like, I'm glad he just went for it. But it was pointless, his stolen base today.
Hey, they all count the same in the score sheet. When you win by 1 million points again, we'll point to this moment probably and say, damn it, Kyle cooked. All right, Kyle, you're going to take a back seat here. Well, actually, first, I guess, since you are here and you're not like the majority of the league we're going to break down, how do you feel like your draft went? Did it kind of go according to plan? What was your sort of idea going into it?
Yeah, I think it was the tale of two halves. I think I got a little too cocky after the first half of the draft. The 3 of us were in the room together at Mark Missigman's manor. And so I think Spark, Menace, and I both felt similarly that the early values for the high-end players I was pretty happy with. Mm-hmm. And so I was really pleased to get Jose Ramirez where I did. I would also, Trout, I think that's probably a premium. I don't think he's worth $47, but I was actually pleased to get him there, just given where I thought he would actually go in the draft. So what I'm saying is, I guess early on, I was really excited by the outcome there. I think as the draft went on, I was a little too complacent and just thought that there would be more value. I just kind of kept waiting and waiting and waiting. And ultimately, there was only one player left that I thought was worth maybe more than $4 or $5, which was Michael Conforto. But there was probably a solid 8, 9, maybe 10 players before Conforto went that I would probably rather have. And so that's the big thing. So I would give myself maybe like a C+, because I did plan on buying a couple of expensive players. I executed that. I had a couple of targets that were in the $1 range, and I got many of those players. I just think I did fail to kind of get some of the middle players that would have rounded out my roster a little better instead of these like post 350 guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's pretty reasonable. I think you're making a good point too. It's hard to say anyone super expensive is ever a great buy, but I don't know, man. $75, Jose Ramirez is probably 1A or 1B of the top hitters out there, top players overall out there. And we were talking a lot before the auction started in the draft room, like, we're going to see a $90 player, $100 player this year. I think getting him for 75 is a pretty good deal. I know it's going to be more than like the auction calculator tells you, but you almost always have to pay a premium at the top. And while I do think you're right that I kind of agree the first, 60 picks or so, most of the elite players did go for closer to what they should probably than some previous years. I was impressed. I think it worked out pretty good for you getting him. You pair him with Judge. What do you think, Mark, though? Let's look at some of these hitters. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, looking at Kyle's draft, and not to regurgitate what you guys already said, but the elite hitters that were left in the draft pool, I, like you guys, also thought they were going to go for closer to $90, or maybe we were even pushing our first triple digit player for the auction. But Ramirez at 75, that's right in line with, the Freeman at 70 and some of the other premium hitters that were still up there. I agree. I don't think Trout is worth $47, but for what you had going into it, if he stays healthy, he's definitely going to return that. So, it's not a bad risk to take. And then kind of similar to what my strategy was, kind of similar to what you were talking about, and just trying to fill out with $1 guys, which the shots you took on those $1 guys weren't bad. I mean, Bobby Miller for $1, Dustin May, Brooks Lee, Joe Adell, Caleb Durbin just won a roster spot today, or all but locked it up. So, you did a good job of hedging out the rest of your roster with these $1 guys who could turn into something. So it'll be interesting. And once again, out to an early lead by hammering as many spots as you could in the Asia games, which could go a long way. Those 2 steals could really turn the tides at the end of the season.
Yeah, Asian Kyle's off to a hot start. I was showing most of the hitters just that Kyle kept mostly pitchers. Like Kyle's entire pitching rotation was almost filled out before we started. But I mean, yeah, Mark's had a good point. Some of these call-out ones, Durbin, like you just said, Mark, was trending towards getting a spot during the auction. It's going to work out that way. It looks like that could be really exciting.
Mm-hmm.
I really like Gavin Lux. He was someone I kind of wanted for a buck back. I had him at the end of last year and debated keeping him for 6. You didn't go for that, obviously, but he was hitting the ball really hard and putting together really strong average and OPS both. Second half, you hate leaving the Dodgers, but Cincinnati's a pretty good ballpark to hit in, and that's not a bad lineup either. That could work out really well. And Conforto, man, if he gives you an 804 OPS this year, you're gonna be pretty happy with that, I'd say, right?
Yeah, let's lock it in. I'm happy with that.
Yeah, 286 with an 804 would probably be close to a league winner at $8 or whatever. But yeah, no, overall, I think it was a little above average draft for Kyle, probably.
Kyle, yeah. Who was your favorite buy, and who was a guy you were like, man, I can't believe I clicked the extra $1 on him, or just got him for $1? Just curious.
Yeah, I mean, my whole plan was stars and scrubs, as you can tell. In terms of the targets, I kind of like Nolan Jones this year. So I was kind of happy to get him for, I thought, a little bit less than what he was worth. Mm-hmm. And then on the pitching side, I'm now a little bit concerned that Carrasco could win the job, but I was really excited to get Will Warren for $1. He was a player that he was kind of my second Hail Mary last year. The 2 players I wanted to target in last year's draft as like the $1 just lotto tickets were Jared Jones, and then my second was Will Warren. So I think he's had, better control this spring. He's had some pretty decent results while still having good stuff. So I think there's a good chance he's like a Michael King Jr. And I mean, I think he's a popular, dark horse to be a good player this year. But I'd say those are probably my favorites. Dustin May, I think I got kind of lucky on the timing with him too. I think he won his spot shortly after the draft, so may go for a little bit more expensive in a draft if we had it today. But honestly, I want to give you guys credit, because we'll touch on your teams. But while I like Jose Ramirez, and Trout was definitely a target of mine, I would much rather have Machado for 45. That's $2 less than Trout. That's on Mark's team, and then Nick. Probably my top target of the draft was Trey Turner. And I just didn't expect to really have enough money to get someone like Jose Ramirez, who I do have higher than Trey, but I like Turner more at the value that you got. So I think you guys both, we'll talk about that. But did you guys have any other? Actually, Bobby Miller was the other one. I was surprised he went for $1.
Yeah.
Any further thoughts on Jordan Lawler, as he was a hot topic during the auction when we were sitting across from each other?
Well, yeah, embarrassingly enough, I guess I didn't really expect New Nick to take like 7 different shortstops. So my math was a little off, And at that point in the draft, I didn't have a shortstop. I mean, had I known, like, maybe I could have just picked up a random $1 player off of the waiver and traded him for Bucher. Maybe that would have worked instead. But,
Ooh, spicy.
Ooh.
Yeah, I didn't really target Lawler. That was kind of a random one where I literally didn't have a shortstop. And I just got scared. I thought he was worth more than $3, but yeah, Mark, I'm not psyched that he's being sent down.
Yeah.
I know Perdomo signed a deal, but I was hoping that he would sneak it onto the roster. So I think he's still a top prospect, but not super happy with it, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree that I still think the pedigree is still there. And there were rumors that he might go into the outfield with some of the injuries that they were dealing with, but that unfortunately didn't come to fruition. I was just curious at how you're still feeling about that one. But yeah, overall, I think a solid draft, C, B minus.
Yeah, I was going to say low B probably. You got Brooks Lee, though, Kyle, at shortstop. You don't even think, since Royce Lewis is just dead again, shocker there, Brooks Lee's going to be your guy.
I do like Brooks Lee.
All right, let's hit the next team. Who is in second place as of the first 2 days?
I believe it's you.
I think I'm third or fourth.
I think it's Ray.
It's Mund. From almost worst to almost first. Welcome to Team Raymond.
Oh, Raymond.
Does not show us right.
Shohei Ohtani.
Ooh, that's good.
Yeah. Okay. So here's a little more balance of a roster here. We'll start with the hitters. Kyle, I guess I had Mark go first last time just because it was your team. What were your sort of overall thoughts on Raymond's draft?
I like that Ray went stars and scrubs. Kind of early, weird, bad luck with bets. I'm a little concerned losing, like, I heard 15 pounds maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I think
body weight.
Yeah, man. I heard Lindor. Lindor at 66. Yeah.
Yep.
That's a really good deal, all things considered. We all know how Raymond feels about Cedric Mullins, so glad to see he's back on the roster.
Raymond's been lipping him up. Those without lips love those with lips.
So, yeah, I feel like I don't have that much. I think it was good. I think Ray has quickly turned this into a really strong offense with top-level stars and some really interesting prospects. So I think he did a really good job overall. I think just highlighting an interesting player, I think maybe he went a little too expensive, but really exciting is Christian Encarnacion Strand. Mm-hmm. I think he's had some of the highest exit velocities of all of spring, and he's done that consistently. So I think pairing a couple high upside players like that, where you can cut the cord on them early on, I think that's kind of a fun way to approach the year.
Yeah, and I think some of these $1 guys I really like too. I mean, Cam Smith, I think that was a waiver pickup, so I'm ignoring that.
That was a waiver.
Did you draft him?
No, that was a waiver pickup. You were right.
But my one I was going to call out is Austin Hayes, who not only looks like he'll play every day, but he's been hitting cleanup a lot for the Reds. So if he's going to hit even 5 or 6 days a week in the 3, 4, 5 of what is one of the better offenses, it's one of the better ballparks, that's pretty awesome for a buck. Austin Hayes is kind of a meat and potatoes guy, but he's going to have good stats if he does that.
I think Hayes was also a waiver pickup.
Oh, was he?
Yeah.
Raymond, I hate your draft. I love your waiver pickups. Knew Smith was. I thought Hayes was not. Okay. Well, one other medal for Raymond, though. I think Raymond made a smart move hours before when he cut, unfortunately, with the injury of Luis Hill, but also Gonzalez from the Pirates. I think it seems insignificant just because saving $3 isn't that much, but it's the extra buck I'm getting Colt Keith instead of losing him for a buck. It's the extra buck I'm getting, I don't know, Ray Almuto being able to go 5 instead of 4. So I think that was good team building from Raymond to listen to the pod, realize it was bad to keep that guy, and then cut him immediately and cut your losses, move on. And I'm sorry, Mark, I didn't mean to interrupt you. What did you say as I was talking?
Oh, no, you were fine. I was just saying both the first two you called out were both waiver pickups. I mean, looking at his draft, he got 2 studs right off the bat in Lindor and Betts, which is always going to, leave you feeling good when you exit the auction. One downside, which I think he's fixed since the draft last week, he drafted one reliever who I'm not even sure was a confirmed closer at that point in Trinan. And him and I were actually texting after the draft, and he did not realize that saves were worth 2 and votes were worth 1. So he was like, yeah, I kind of fucked up there. Went really hitter heavy because he had great pitching going into the draft, so I think he had a solid plan there. Negatives, I don't know if Morel was worth $20, but at that point in the draft, it was just kind of what you had to spend to get someone like that. And same thing with Horner, $15. I think I could have kept him for 16, so we went for $1 less than value, so to speak. But maybe a couple more dollars than I think I would have been willing to spend. If he runs, he could be worth it, but I feel like he's just kind of average. And then if he steals, you get that value back. But I mean, I think what really needs to be addressed with Raymond's team is what he's been doing in terms of the transactions after the draft. Because looking at, his roster post-draft versus what it is today, it's entirely different with all of the moves. So he did a great job drafting to get the assets that he needed to make some of those swing for the fences trades.
He's been cutting a lot of players that he picks up. He's been doing a lot of transactions.
He's very active again. I mean, the message around Raymond's team last year obviously was, he's smart, he knows what he's doing, he's just not in a position to compete right now, but give him a year, give him 2 years, and he'll be right back in the mix. And I feel like it's kind of hard to argue now looking at his roster that he's not one of the contenders in the league.
Yeah, some TikTok gave him Ohtani basically for free. That was crazy.
Well, then that same TikTok gave him Jordan and Cole Reagans and someone else. Oh, Porter Hodge. Right. But yeah, we'll get to the trades later.
Maybe you should have held on to Blake Trinan for another week, and you get a hold out of him for free and a couple strikeouts. But I think other than that, I agree with Mark, and I can't make fun of you too much, Ray, because I actually picked up a pitcher who he retired from baseball, so like probably not a good pick to have in the draft.
Who's that?
Hudson.
Daniel Hudson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I that was stupid, but I was just trying to grab a couple of easy stats from the 2-game series. But
he was so demoralized to be joining your roster, he just called it quits and hung the cleats up.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Last one I want to say is just I think even though his first couple matchups make him kind of a rough guy to play early, I like Reese Olson still. I liked him a lot last year and had him. We'll see. If he does a good job in his first couple matchups, he's going to be someone you want all year. Goodbye for $2.
Yep.
All right. Let's be done with Raymond.
Now it's Nick time.
Oh, we should be talking throughout this too, I guess. Mark didn't do power rankings, Kyle, but do you like yourself more or less than you do when we did the rankings? And then what about Raymond?
I don't think I had the strongest draft, but I actually like myself more. Part of it is I do kind of like the stars and scrubs for myself. I'm pretty active as a player, so I think I'll make okay decisions in terms of just cutting players if they're not performing. And I think if 2 or 3 of my players hit, like Lux or Brooks Lee, some of these guys who shaping up to have some decent playing time, I think I'm in a lot better shape than I was.
Yeah. What about Raymond? Do you think he's better or worse?
I think Raymond's way better off. I mean, Raymond is now a serious contender. He has, 3 players who are borderline first round, Ohtani, Betts, and then he also has Jordan, maybe a second rounder. But, I mean, those are all guys who could be the most valuable player in all of fantasy.
You pair him with Crochet, too. Yeah, I agree. Raymond definitely. I had you a little bit higher than Raymond, so I think you're probably not moved too much for me, at least. Raymond has moved up a few spots. What do you think, Mark?
Looking at Kyle's team, I'd say I like him more after the draft, but that's also just kind of because his hitters were very bare going in. It was just like Berger, Bazana, and Judge. And then Raymond, if it was just post-draft, I would say move him up a spot from where he would have been in the middle after the Ohtani trade for me, not quite contend top 3 or 4, But after all the trades and everything, I feel like he's got to be up there in 1, 2, or 3 for me. But like you said, I also didn't sit down and rank everybody before or after.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Let's break me down. Your third place team, bronze medal, after 2 games. Tell me what you guys thought.
Kyle, floor is yours.
I really like what you did. So McCarthy was a target of mine. I think, just given the average, the playing time, and obviously not just the 20 or so stolen bases, but the fact that he's one of the fastest players in baseball. As much as he's become kind of like the joke of our league, he's, I think, a pretty valuable player. Bad X, I think, plugging in our numbers, he's probably worth a little bit more than $12. I think we're all just kind of sniping the fact that, hey, he's not going to go for 12. He's kind of like the Yandy, just a completely different type of player where he's probably not going to go for his projection value. So you're trying to just capture whatever you can. So those are the types of guys I think are really great to have. Again, like Max Muncy, nothing like McCarthy as a player, but just that type of guy that maybe you keep a couple years. I toyed with keeping him this past year. Hoped to get him maybe for $3, but good buy that you had there. Swanson, another guy who I think is a little bit boring, but I really liked being able to have just an extra couple games here at the beginning. And I think he's also kind of a steal this year. I think just with the way the Cubs are shaping up and the fact that Swanson has had a couple of years that are probably maybe average or maybe slightly below what you want, I think this is a really good time to buy into him. And so he was one of my top targets as well. Nothing really crazy to say. You were one of my top teams going in. Still one of my top teams. I think you did really well in the draft.
Mark, do you love me?
Personally, yes. Fantasy baseball wise, no. No, looking at your draft, you had a good draft. I just think when you're only drafting like 9 or 10 guys, whenever I see that, I'm like, oh, was it really that good of a draft? But when your team was that loaded with keepers going into it, you probably had the second least money to spend or the least amount of money to spend. So it's like, was the draft really that exciting? But obviously you went into it with a plan. You wanted Turner, you got him. You wanted Swanson. I didn't realize that Swanson was such a under the radar target for you guys, because I remember right when you made that pick, you would kind of give a little fist bump underneath the table. Was he hurt last year? Was that what you guys were talking about at the draft?
I don't remember him being hurt.
Yeah, I don't think he was hurt. He's actually pretty durable. I mean, he was banged up at certain points, I'm sure. He just had a little bit of an underwhelming year, but I think the lineup gets better. And especially when you see some of the other shortstops, I think in his range, I was pretty surprised. He was less of a target than someone like Treya was, especially after I got Treya. But I had him priced in the low 20s, and getting him at 15 felt like a pretty good value at that point.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the rest of the draft, the Bayo pick for $1, I know he's hurt, but he'll if he comes back healthy in May, he'll return that.
Hurt players for me. That's a big deal to me this last couple of years.
Carlos Santana's never sexy, but he's the perfect $1 guy to go on a team that's built like this. There were two, the Edwin Uceta, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I was actually had planned on nominating him the pick before you nominated him. I was like, nah, I can probably get him later in the draft. And then, of course, you had decided to snipe him from me, but that was my own fault. The one that really bothered me was the Scherzer pick. I love that right at the end of the draft for $2. We'll talk about it later when we get to my team, but 40-year-old starting pitchers who would go for $1 were my kind of bread and butter this year. And I didn't get to complete the trifecta, unfortunately, because you sniped him from me, but I do think he's going to be good this year. I think he's going to have a bounce back. So for $2, I love that. But yeah, I think going into it, if I had power ranked it, I probably would have put you at 1. Injuries are unavoidable, and it sucks seeing all the red flags. But,
I have 7.
Going into it, I'd still probably put you at 1 right now, but we'll see how the season goes.
Yeah. Appreciate that you said a love. I think he was my favorite target that I got for actually $1. I'm fairly confident, just the way Tampa Bay operates, that either I'm blanking on his name now. Who's their closer? Oh, Fairbanks. Fairbanks, who's really good in his own right, is either going to get hurt because he always gets hurt, and you said he gets to close, or if Fairbanks is not hurt and any good at all, he'll get traded because they're not going to pay him, and you say he's going to be a potential closer for $6 next year to have.
Yep, it was a great buy. That's one of the big regrets I had, man. At halfway through, towards the end of the draft, I was just getting so cute with my little $1 bids, just hoping people would spend money on shitty players. But why not just go after players you actually want? And you said it was an awesome pick, so good job.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. So it sounds like I stayed kind of the same. Kyle, I said you were about the same, probably going in and out, even though I did like your draft. We think we agreed, all three of us, that Raymond's moved up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to keep us honest, because I feel like I'm going to say, I like this for everybody. I want to make sure I say something I don't like much. We'll see if I actually can do it.
Well, up next, I think I can change it up a little bit.
Everybody said this guy would be fourth, and here he is at fourth. Nick. I like this. 2 Knicks in the top half of the league. That's good looking.
And 2 Marks in the bottom.
Yeah, the Knicks are beating the Marks. That's good to see.
That should be the free agent player bet going out for the season. Both Knicks finishing positions and both Marks finishing positions. Which team will do better?
I like that. Do you like the combination of both Knicks stats or both Marks stats better?
Weighted average Nick, weighted average Mark.
Yeah, Kyle's got it.
X Mark, X Nick. Okay, well here's Nick's draft. Mark, you love Nick. Tell me what you thought of his team though.
He loves shortstops.
He does love shortstops.
I think is the
He didn't love Danny though.
It would have fit in well. Give him some grace, seeing it's his first draft in the league, and I think even the most experienced fantasy baseball player would be kind of shocked coming in, taking over a team, and being thrown into our auction for the first time, seeing what some of the values go for, and especially if I was joining in what is this year 11, 12 of this league, and seeing some of the values that the first few guys go for, just kind of being whoa, this is not how I thought things would go. If I were him, I would have done the Raymond model from last year, where just blow all of my money on the best guys at the start of the draft to then turn them around into guys like Grayson Rodriguez in the trade last year and all the stud prospects Caminero that Raymond acquired throughout the year. But not to be super negative, looking at his picks one by one, Severino for $1, I like that a lot. Getting Heel for $2 is solid.
Perfect guy to get.
Yeah, he's the perfect guy to be on that team. I think we were talking about it during the draft. It was a shame that Grayson went for as much as he did with him being hurt right now, because again, that would have been, if he had gone for $7, praise something like that, because he can just have him in the IL for 3 months or even the whole year and not have to worry about keeping him. And I'm sure he'll still be worth the $18 next year, but like you were saying, the dollars add up very quickly. Raymond dropping Nick Gonzalez and Luis Hill, those dollars can help you out later. But I do like that he started to, make trades and giving up Bichette, and I believe he traded me Foley earlier. So he's doing a good job of not just holding on to guys to hold on to them. He's making moves to get cheaper guys who could potentially turn into something to keep going into next year.
Yeah, I think it's pretty reasonable. I definitely do agree with you. I think it's easy to say in hindsight, but especially when we did see some of those top end guys like Ramirez and Lindor, I think go at basically cost or close to cost with the inflation. I do think I would have liked it a lot more if he'd gotten a couple of them, as opposed to getting a lot of 20s to 30s with Arias and Volpe and Bichette and Tovar.
Mm-hmm.
You have a lot of chances to hit there. It's like the opposite of the stars and scrubs. And I feel like it also may be a little bit that I am biased towards the star and scrubs approach. So I could be not checking that when I look at someone who did it kind of a more balanced way. And I do agree with you, too, that trading is generally a good predictor of success. I liked a lot. It feels kind of weird saying at $10 he's going 200th or something like that in the NFBC, but Correa was probably one of my favorite picks, and probably my favorite pick Nick made. I think even though he's your 17th shortstop, I think Correa has legitimate value, maybe even at $10. Good and stays healthy. that could be part of your future next year for a year or two maybe, and if not, you trade them off.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, Kyle?
I think a lot of the same stuff. Where I'll give Nick credit, I really liked the moves that he made before the draft. I think he really stored up a lot of value, made some savvy decisions, getting cheaper players. I think, it's hard because it's his first round through, but I think Nick is like hyper conscious maybe of players who are cheap now and kind of he sees them as like really good keepers, and that's a good way to look at things. But I think some of the moves he's making, like Lane Thomas for Bo Bichette straight up, like Lane Thomas was literally in the draft. So like he was, much cheaper than a $40 Bo Bichette. And, he went for $7. So I guess to your point, hindsight's 2020, but having like a $45 Machado versus a $40 Bichette, or you could, go up and get like a $75 Betts or Ramirez for the combination of just a few of these players, like Arias. I'll throw him in the mix. I get people are excited about him. He's always going to hit for average, but in our league and our structure, he doesn't really present that value. So I think on the offensive side, I think it probably would have been easier for him to build out his team had he gone for a couple of those big players, because the flip side of that is that then the rest of your team is also composed of one or maybe even like $2-3 players. Whereas right now he has a lot of players who could end up being good. Matt Wallner, like him. Are you going to keep him next year? He's $18 now. So I think, kind of tough situation overall. I'm, sorry to say this, but I'd put you a few slots lower just in terms of how the draft went.
Yeah, Kyle's making a beautiful point that I wish I had said that elegantly. It's absolutely true. I think sort of the fun way to think about it is that if you draft, let's just say, replace a couple of these guys with a 75 Jose Ramirez, the benefit of that, if you are rebuilding on top of having a trade chip, is that you do get a bunch of $1 spots to take shots on better keeper long term, because there's no one here for less than $6, which is hard. And then the other good part of that is you really don't even have to hit on like who the best keepers are. And the reason that is just because you can wait till May if you're Nick and trade that Jose Ramirez for whoever is the breakout keeper option.
Yeah.
You don't have to hold on to it and get guessed right. You can just pick whoever has it and take it from them. And that sort of is the reason I think that usually is the way I'd go too. That said, as we've said already a couple times now, first time drafting in this league, definitely a unique experience. I don't dislike what he did overall. I think I agree that it's one of the below average drafts, but it's not my least favorite. And I think it's okay for the start of your rebuild. Anything else on Nick, guys?
No, excited to have him in the league. Hope he has fun and wants to continue to try and build it out and, can turn it into a contender here shortly.
Well, he actually already has some money right
now. Actually, not to continue to pile on, but in the future, don't leave the auction with money still available.
Oh, great point, Mark. Actually, yeah, sorry. Yeah, this might be my least favorite draft, actually, because Nick did leave like 25 or 30 bucks on the table.
Yeah. But that's it.
I'm glad you said it, though, Mark, because I forgot all about that.
On the flip side,
I've made that mistake before, too. Sorry, Kyle.
I'm with you. On the flip side, don't bid up a player just in order to spend the last dollar. We've also seen that a couple of times where like you just not like one plus a bid, but you just bid up a player like way more than they're worth, and then that just locks them in. I think it happened to Ryan McMahon. Is that what you said?
I was just saying nominate the last player for $28 because you have 28 instead of 1.
Exactly. Yeah. That just limits your options.
All right, so here's 5th place Roman. Good job starting hot, Roman. Mark went first last time, Kyle. What do you think of Roman? You usually like his team.
I do like Roman's team. Good job, like sniping some of the Dodger value. I was impressed. You kept Hernandez in the lineup. I think he had a really bad game 1, but you were gifted a homer and some nice RBIs for game 2. So that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, Roman was one of these players who already had his team really done already. I think he had probably the least amount of money and maybe the fewest spots left.
No,
So,
he had his roster, but he had the least money.
Oh, really?
I think he needed 13 players for like $35 or $38, something like that. Yeah.
So, I mean, I like it overall. I think the pitching, I do think this kind of goes back to the previous conversation, but I think he kept more pitchers than I would have. Some of the targets aren't like my guys, but nothing wrong with that. You should go after who you really like. But yeah, I think good overall. I don't really have anything. He didn't have as much money to spend, so not much changed. But I think I just, again, want to give him credit for trying to go for guys who are in this Japan series, because as trivial as it seems, it does give you a little boost.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. And I was the most critical last time we potted about Roman's team. I think Roman did some good stuff with the limited money he did have. I thought it'd be hard for him, and he got some guys who were still pretty decent. I think one really smart thing he did was pairing Chapman with Hendricks. I'm hoping the closer is Slayton, but he most likely has the closer between the two, and he paid $6 to get it. The other one's going to get holds. I think that was smart. What do you think, Mark? Did you like Roman's draft?
His draft, again, it kind of goes back to your team, and there's at least one other, like not having a lot of money. So when you're looking at the actual draft, it's just kind of to me. But I didn't know who his guys were. So if he wanted, all of these $1 guys and they were his targets, then good on you for being able to get your guys. I think, like we've already said, his team was pretty much filled out, at least his pitching staff and the big name hitters. So there wasn't much to do. I love Willie Castro for $7. I do think he is a valuable, especially with all the position flexibility that he brings to a team. And then Hendricks was someone that I was targeting, hoping that people weren't going to be that in on him and would be more focused on Chapman. So to your point, getting both of them was a huge win. But yeah, like I like Roman's team. I don't know if I'd put it in the top 3, top 4. And his draft, it's just a C for me, because there wasn't anything, like he didn't do anything. It was like, wow, that was really dumb. I can't believe he spent X amount on that guy. But there wasn't, none of these $1 guys are like, yeah, that's the Jared Jones of last year. Spend $1 and he finishes in the like a top 35 starting pitcher.
Yeah, I think that's pretty reasonable. I like Roman's team slightly more now, but I agree it was just because of the lack of money and the lack of ability to go after most of the big fish. I think it was a very average draft, which again isn't really a critique just because you didn't have the money.
Yep.
All right, let's get out of the top 5 and move on to our 6th place team, if it will load. Eric. It's funny. So Eric gets all the Asian international players, and Kyle gets all the Asian games.
Yeah.
You guys are like passport bros. It's so cool.
I think Eric might have had the pick of the draft.
Yeah, I mean, we can probably all say it already, right? The best pick of the draft is definitely that Ozzy Albies.
Yeah,
absolutely.
$29.
Yeah. Great job, Eric. That was definitely, I think, the best buy. I was trying to find, when I was looking at this before we did this tonight, some other ones that I think are even close. And Albies I have is like a low $40 player with inflation baked in. I couldn't find anybody else outside of a couple like $1 guys who went for way more than like $7 or $8 of surplus. So, I mean, not only is it a bunch of surplus, it's surplus with a player who's actually like a top 45-ish, top 40 hitter, whatever you rank him as.
Mm-hmm.
That was definitely the steal of the draft. Outside of that, though, what do you guys think of Eric's draft?
Yeah, Albies was the guy who everyone just kept referencing in the room for the rest of the night. So kudos again. Hat for 30 was a lot, but at that point they're, getting the extra games early and what was left. Oh, snap. I don't necessarily love the starters that he went out and bought. The $17 Fott, the $20 Gore, the $12 Keller. They could all turn out to be at that value, but I don't know if it would have been better saving that money and going for some more high-end hitters, especially since he had already had Rasmussen, Sasaki, Skubal, and Yamamoto. and Senga that he had kept. I know he and I were going after a lot of the same guys because I felt there was at least twice, if not three times, where I bid up someone at the last second and won him and he was not happy. And then just looking at it, wish he had gone a little heavier on relievers as well. As of now, he has Chad Green and Griffin Jacks as his only two relievers. So that could be an issue here, especially with the way saves are going to be valued now. But I do think that Albie's pick makes up for a lot of that. So overall, I think he had a good draft, and I do think he has a solid team.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. What do you think, Kyle?
I don't want to belabor the Aussie point, but in terms of like giving Eric a grade on the draft, I think the high end players are what matter most to me in terms of how you do. So I would just say he did better than average. I think he had a really good draft overall. I do agree with Mark. Some of the players, Hap was a target for me, not at $30 probably. On the positive side, I do like the Brewers he got, Mitchell, Ortiz. Those are guys that, you know, if things really don't work out, you can cut them, but they both have speed. Ortiz has looked especially good, you know, this spring. I also think Wilson is a decent player to get. He's one of those guys who can kind of hit for average and steal a lot of bases. So I think kind of exciting there. So I agree with what Mark is saying. I do think Eric is a pretty smart guy, and I think he is punting, you know, saves and holds. And I think, you know, if he pulls it off the right way, I think it could go really well for him, especially because of the way that our league is set up with the limit on starts. What he could do is he could really max out his starts early on, go over pace intentionally, and then as the season goes on, you know, trade away starters and be overweight relief pitchers. And I think he might actually be able to catch up faster than you would think by streaming relief. And that's one of those things where relief pitchers, you know, they don't count as a start, obviously. So you can stream them a lot more sustainably. You also have a better idea sometimes, like if they haven't played in a couple games, okay, you'll definitely get some stats in the next, you know, 2 days, let's say.
Exactly.
I also think there's an added advantage. You know, this is just what I think. I could be wrong, but I've said it a couple of times. I think it's nice to have pitching early on. So if you're going to do this strategy, I think it makes more sense to start out the way he's doing it and pick up relief later on and get as many starts early in the season. So I think that is his strategy. I think it's intentional. I really like how Eric has built out his team the past few years. So I think it's actually fun to see someone do something a little bit different. So I would give him a really high score overall in the draft. I think it's clear that he picked up some players that I had lower than he bought them, but he's been right on a lot of the targets he's had over the past couple of years. Like Marte is a good example where he's, you know, one of the best keepers in the whole league. You know, so I'm excited. Also, he did get a couple of his twins, so it's good to see that too.
Yeah, dude, Kyle said that so well. I'm not going to repeat any of it other than just that Eric definitely listened to the pod because that was what I said. I said you're low on saves, but do not buy a bunch of closers in the auction to get the best players. You got Ozzy Albies, who we all agree is the buy the whole auction. That automatically means you're an above average auction. And I would do exactly what you said. The other benefit, Kyle, to what you were saying, the only thing you didn't note that I think is true, is just that on top of the fact that you can trade whenever you want for people who are way ahead in safe holds, and that will happen, especially teams who are rebuilding are going to want to trade their closers because generally they're not good keepers. On top of that, at the All-Star break, there's going to be a bunch of trades, and there'll be like 3 or 4 new closers. Just blow your buy a couple closers then. It's
exactly
possible to punt save holds for half the year. And if I was going to do it, which I didn't do, but if I was going to do it, I would do it exactly the way he did it, where I punt the first half of the year. Plus, you by then know exactly how much you have to make up. You can tell, like, hey, if I get 1 closer, I can add maybe 3 points in the final 2 months. If I get 2, I can maybe add 6. It definitely lets you decide what you want to do in the middle of the season. So I think Eric's is my favorite draft so far. It's hard when you have the Albies not to be. I think he's my favorite.
Yeah, well said. I agree. And it's fun anytime you see someone do something different, and that's usually where you can get the edge.
Definitely. All right. Let's look at number 7. Brendan. Brendan never finishes 7th. Brendan's either going to win or finish in the bottom. There's no scenario Brendan finishes 7th. Come on. All right, based off memory, what do you guys think of Brendan's team? Here we go.
Huh.
So Brendan did have some money. How do you guys feel he did?
Kyle, you want to start on this one?
Sure. Yeah, I think Brendan did pretty well. I feel like I can't really criticize him because I think he's proven that he, has really good strategy, and when he targets guys that he likes, it usually works out pretty well. With that said, I think Wheeler was clearly his prize gem of the draft. For me, I don't really like doing that. That's just a preference. I think through a lot of the discussions, he was a top 3 ranked, player pretty much for all of us. We had Brendan, 1, 2, or 3 across the board. And so I think it makes sense. Yeah, starting pitching, probably an area of need where he has these really high ceiling players, but how well will they work out? Might as well go out and get the top value that exists, or I should say the top starting pitcher that exists in the draft, and that's what he did. For me, since he had so much money, I would kind of rather see make a strength stronger, go out and get Jose Ramirez, go out and get, Trey Turner, Lindor, just one of the big boppers. But that's just how I would approach it. I think to give him some, really solid credit, I think Blade, believe it or not, is kind of an exciting player at $3. I think he could be really good this year, and actually the Athletics as a whole, I think could be a solid bit better than what people expect. So I think that's a fun pick. I think Stott at $7 is actually a pretty good value. Mark, earlier you were talking about Swanson maybe being hurt. I think Stott was actually one of the guys that we were talking about during the draft where Stott was hurt pretty much all of last year. I think it had maybe a wrist injury that they didn't really talk about all that much, but a lot of people are saying kind of zapped his power. So I think underrated pick there, possibly getting more power, also getting some really solid speed from Stott, obviously. That's really all I have. I think, picking up someone like Pages, I think that was after the draft, but geez, pretty underrated. It didn't work out amazingly, obviously good OPS, but it's not just this series, but I think Pages is going to have a lot more playing time now than people expected with Kim being sent down. So, I would say Brendan had a good draft. He obviously went after need. I would have been a little spicier if I were in his shoes, but maybe that's why I'm not in his shoes and I have the team that I have. So good job overall.
Are you calling him bland, Brendan?
He doesn't have those chili pepper lights
Bland.
behind him like you do.
He's not spicy Kyle. What do you think, Mark?
To stay consistent, he had more money than Roman. I think he probably had more money than you, but there wasn't a lot of need in terms of positions that you need to fill out. So, looking at the actual draft results, I'm not blown away. Looking at his pitching staff, and taking Wheeler out of it, there are a lot of solid names, but a lot of potential injury risks, like DeGrom. If he stays healthy, top 5 starting pitcher, but that hasn't happened in 4 or 5 years. Robbie Ray, old, coming off injury. So, and Woodruff, again, big name, but hasn't pitched in over a year. So putting Wheeler into that, I do think was a huge win for him. And kind of what Kyle said, he went and got his guys, and he usually hits on those targets. So can't really fault that. Calling out one specific one, I think McMahon at $6 was a great buy, and someone who I would have loved to have gotten for that value. He's not, he's 30 years old, but he still plays in Coors. He's going to hit second, third, or fourth in that lineup, and it's in Coors, so you got to imagine there's still going to be some pop in that. So I think that's a great buy. I'm just curious, who is Sebastian Walcott? Because I know Brendan knows his prospects, but I had never heard of him before the draft, and then looking at him again on his team.
He's a pretty well-regarded prospect.
Okay.
I've gotten him for 1 instead of 3, but this time a year from now, he has a case to be one of the top 2 or 3.
Yeah.
He was first round. Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, looking like purely ranking his draft, it's just a C for me, but that's just staying consistent with how I feel. Like I just like to have a big draft. But his team, if I had done the rankings before, he would have been in the top 3, and he still is.
Yep. I won't belabor the point. For me, the one thing I'll say that's a little bit different is I think I liked it more than either of them by a slight amount, Brendan. You were my 1 going in, so I can't move you higher, but I do like what you did. They brought up good picks in Blade, Stott, and McMahon. I also really did $12. I hate paying for catcher, but Will Smith would have been okay paying $12. I think he's gonna have a pretty good year. And I will take the other side slightly. Not that Kyle was criticizing it too much, but I think Wheeler at 62 as the top pitcher out there is fine. And I think it's probably what I would have tried to do generally with your pitching staff too. I think Schwellenbach's exciting. Robbie Ray looks great in spring training and it's pretty exciting. DeGrom is, until he dies, amazing. Wheeler's a great last 4 or 5 years, super durable. Obviously, you wish he wasn't 62, but I think that's probably a fair price for like a second round-ish value, just with the way inflation works. And I think that's probably what I would have targeted too. I would have probably really done a hitter, but if you're going to get a pitcher, and it looks like you're going to do that, he's who I would have gone for. And I think you had an okay deal. I would give him like a slightly above average draft overall. And I can't move him up though because I had him 1 already. I still think he's my 1.
Slightly above average. I mean, his team is also a little above average.
Yeah, exactly. But unfortunately, he's in 7th place. So sorry for that early, Brendan. Let's look at Mark's dad. Mark, you're going first here.
Let it pull up before we dive into it. There we go.
Oh fuck! Another pitcher.
No, who the fuck is this guy? Why is he nominated him? Yeah, so
love you, Jack.
Yeah, Papa Spark made a rare in-person appearance for the auction at Casa de Miz, which was a lot of fun for all those in attendance. He was freaking out because like the computer was lagging behind a little bit on some of the bids, and he was worried he was going to miss his guys. Looking at his draft, he stayed very consistent to what he does. He never. Can you see it? I don't know if the recording is going to pick that up or not.
It definitely had nothing happened.
Well, it like pops up on your like speaker view, so it distracted me. But like the $43 Santander, the $47 Reynolds, the $25 Ward, like all solid picks, and that's what he likes to do. He doesn't really ever go for the $80 Jose Ramirez, the guy, the elite hitter in the draft who's going to cost a lot of money. And it's worked out well for him so far in this league, so you can't really fault it, but it would be interesting to see him take that different approach. Just looking at it, there isn't really anyone who I'm like, man, I don't think I would have. Maybe $16 for Brandon Lowe, but that's also just because every year I've ever had him on my team, he gets hurt and hits like 17 home runs when everyone's projecting him for 37 home runs. But overall, I like the draft. Top, like he's in the middle tier for me, but Kyle, as we've lost Nick to whatever adventure he's out on right now, what are your thoughts on the other minutes in the league?
I loved it, and it also was so fun drafting with Jack. I loved how jazzed up he got, and yeah, like he was getting real pissed about all the pitchers, so that was really fun. Yeah, I mean, I thought it was good. I don't remember if India was a keeper. I think he was in the draft, right?
He was in the draft.
Yeah, so like $10 India. I would also go out on the limb and say Yandy was one of my favorite buys of the draft. He fits into that category of I think maybe McCarthy, who I was bringing up earlier, where I just think the overall sentiment of the player, for whatever reason, it's everywhere. It's not just our league. The ADP is always super low compared to where they should be. So I thought that was awesome. You know, like Reynolds and Santander, I agree with you. Ward, throw him in the same category, although Ward I think is usually undervalued too. Yeah, like they're middling players, they accumulate, but I think that's kind of, you said it, but that's Jack's style, I guess, and it works. He always has a strong team. I do really like a couple of the trades he made, like Bo Bichette. I mean, straight up Lane Thomas for Bo Bichette. So really, you can't keep Bo Bichette, but he did spend $7 on Bo Bichette. So I would say one of the better buys in the entire draft. Bo Bichette, $7 without being able to keep him. So, like, I'll throw that in and consider that in the draft and say that Jack had one of the strongest drafts. I would also say on the pitching side of things, Skeens really covers a lot of bases for you. But I think a lot of the accumulating boring pitchers that Jack got, although it's not typically what I like to do, I think it'll serve him really well. And I liked it a lot, to be honest.
Yeah, I think you're both making really
good. What
do
you think, Nick?
I think Jack had a slightly above average draft. It was one I think I liked him a little bit more afterwards. If you guys remember, I was pretty low on Jack going in. I think he generally did things I liked, though. India was a target I wanted. Yandy's, I'm sure, like you guys already talked about, one of the best buys in our format. I also did. I know 25 is a lot, but Taylor Ward is somebody I wanted. If I hadn't bought Dansby Swanson, I'm not sure I would have paid 25 for him when he went. But I think he was, in my mind, when he went, the best player left by a decent amount on offense. And then Pavetta, even at 13, I don't think is bad. And Evaldi at 4 feels great. So I think you've supplied your pitching staff decently. I think just as I expected, Jack, you've moved into the middle of the pack for me. And assuming you play waivers the way you always do, you'll probably finish close to the money or contend. As soon as I trade you, probably trade Turner for whoever your best keeper is that's hurt, like Costas. You'll probably win because he'll go for Lindor on me.
And Nick, we were also joking that Bichette was one of the best buys of the draft because you see the $40 price tag there, but really Jack spent $7 on Bichette with just the added component that he can't keep him. So $7, but can't keep him. So that's a great buy.
It's like an options contract, but just for not keeping for like you're trading ability to buy for ability to have you for a year, but get the cheap player in the draft.
Yeah.
No, I liked it a lot though. I think Jack got a little bit better. You guys have any closing thoughts on Jack?
No, I think
good job, Jack. Thanks for
he'll
coming.
stay active and do well like he always does.
Thanks for bringing the Nuggets. All right. Just like we all expected, 9th place, Griffin.
Griffin.
If only he had Ohtani.
If only. First place team with Ohtani.
So how do you guys think he built it out, though?
Kyle, you want to go or you want me to?
I'd like to better for some of these trades, man. I don't know.
Yeah, he's made some moves. It's not even the same team. It's changed the most.
Yeah, could you show the pitching for 1 second?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, that
a couple of the buys, like Nimmo, man, like really good buy for $15, but I'm a little concerned about his leg. I think, is it plantar? So it's his foot, actually. Pretty sure. But
I know the flag's off because he is playing again and expects to play opening day, but yeah, that is a risky one just because it could hurt you over the course of the year.
Yeah, I mean, I would say he has some of the best pitching in our league. I don't like some of the hitting moves, to be honest, that he's made after the draft. Obviously, like pretty much looking at all of his hitters, they're guys who should be in the top 100. Looking at like Adames, Duran, obviously. Teoscar had a career year. Nimmo, to be honest, should be, I think, top 120 if he plays up to his standards. Soler, I know $17 looks like a lot, but I think in our format, he's probably worth more than $24 or so. And then it's just these guys who seem somewhat boring, but then you kind of figure out, oh, Suzuki, he might be a top 50 player if he stays healthy. So I think, he's obviously in position to do really well like he always does, but I would go out on a limb and say I'd like a little bit more of the star power that he had, 3 weeks ago?
Yeah. I think it's generally a pretty solid draft. I know it's $17 too. He's not cheap, but the same way Nimmo, I think Soler in our format's great. I almost kept him. He would have been like 10 or 11, and obviously went for more than that, but I was cash strapped. I think that's even at 17 a good buy, especially for this year. Like in the top 3 or so of that lineup, especially while Trout's playing too. Going to get a lot of runs scored. And then he's kind of bargain bidding first base, which is interesting with O'Hearn and Rayleigh. But Rayleigh, who was really – it's funny they always get traded for each other. They're both on Griffin's team now. Rayleigh was great last year. You guys know Rayleigh's stats by the end of the year?
He was really good once he got traded or picked up in Seattle, wasn't he?
240, fine. But 11 steals, 22 homers. Only played 137 games. This is a guy who's like high 20s, 15 steals. If he played it, he won't play every day because of the lefty thing, I know. But I like him. And the OPS is 825, 785. I feel like he's good in a way that is very useful. I like O'Hearn. I think Griffin had an okay draft. I liked Encarnacion too. Or was that a waiver? I don't remember.
That was a waiver.
Yeah. Well, terrible draft, Griffin. Kind of like Kyle said too. He has one of the top pitching staffs. I thought it was probably my favorite going into the draft, either him or Eric. I still think it's one of the top 2. Not too much to say otherwise, though. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, purely draft, it's just because there wasn't that much going on. Echo Soler, he was someone who I was trying to buy as well. But the Murakami, however you pronounce that, both love and hate that pick there at the end of the draft for $3 because he was someone who I thought I could get the jump on and snag him and just let him sit out in the minors all year until he came over next year. So loved that pick. But yeah, to echo what Kyle said, I like his team before the draft. I like his team after the draft. I don't like his team as much after all of the transactions and trades.
Yeah. We're keeping ourselves honest here. Like we said we're going to talk about. We think some teams are better, some teams are worse. I think Griffin's one that I think I had him 2 before this. I'd probably put him 3 now. So not a huge downgrade, but I do think I liked it a little bit better 3 weeks ago too. Kind of like Kyle said. Any last thought?
I agree with everything. I would have him down a little bit, 4th or 5th place. But I do have one really fun trivia question that connects to his team and his draft to give him a little credit. So looking at our format in the auction calculator, no projections, but looking at 2023, who do you think the top 3 starting pitchers were that year?
Blake Snell.
Yeah.
Yes, Blake Snell was number 2. Yes.
In 2023, Blake Snell, Garrett Cole.
Bingo. Great call. So there's still one more. Garrett Cole was 1.
2023.
Zach Wheeler.
No. I'll give you a hint. He's on Griffin's roster.
Oh, Framber.
Pablo Lopez.
Kyle Bradish.
What? Is that real?
That's what I have right here.
Oh my God, is that true? Oh my, I did not know that.
He made 30 starts in. Did he really make 30 starts in 2023?
He was definitely the race, yeah. That's crazy. He only won 12 games. How is that even possible? Wow.
He won 12 games.
I mean, the ERA and WHIP are great. His
Yeah.
K's more than or right at 1 per inning. I would have lost a lot of money guessing that, though. Wow, you could have given me probably 20 more guesses, Kyle.
So my point is, like, pretty under the radar. Stuff models love Bradish.
Yeah.
He's hurt. There's risk. He was extremely successful in 2023. I know not a lot of playing time, so the auction calculator can be a little flawed there in some ways. But overall, like, really good buy for $3. He's a guy that I wanted. and I was just a little strapped for cash. That kind of goes back to the Conforto and like some of the picks that, hey, probably would have been a little nicer to have, Machado for 45 instead of Trout for 47, that kind of stuff. But even though a little lower on Griffin, wanted to give him some credit for Bradish.
Good job, Griff. We don't like you as much, but we're proud of you for doing that.
Plus, having Bradish, it makes you better at putting together IKEA furniture.
That's true. We're getting close to Brad time.
Yeah, save that for Brad.
First, it's Charlie Brad time. All right, Kyle, you're going first here. It's your nemesis. It's your lover. It's your fantasy baseball partner, Charlie Brown.
I have a little fun in the draft with Charlie, even though we weren't together. I feel like I could sense his thoughts. Like from wherever he was, I could just feel
I knew what
Charlie.
I feel like Charlie's like the most understandable.
Yeah, he is. Like I knew certain players he wanted. So like Trevor Story, I didn't really want Trevor Story, but I actually kind of needed Trevor Story. All the shortstops went to New Nick. I was freaking out. Brooks Lee actually was a target of mine, and I don't know why I was just like not thinking about it, but I was like, Jesus, like there's no shortstops left. I can always trade. I typically do, but man, it would be fun to get some sort of value here. I need a shortstop. You guys know how it is in drafts. Even if you have a plan, when you see a position of need, sometimes you kind of hyper focus on it, and I started to do that a little too much. But Story, once he was nominated, I did just realize, like, I'm not going to get him, but I'm going to max bid the hell out of him because I know Charlie wants Trevor Story. So there are a couple players like that. Bogarts, I'll throw in. He was a target of mine. And I think he just went, I think for fair price. Charlie usually does a really good job with that, but a little more than I wanted to pay, to be honest. But I think still a good price. Same deal, though. I was just trying to bid him up. And then I'll throw Max Muncy in there. I think somewhat high. I think I probably had him around $8-9, but I think always a really fun player to have, and someone who should go for a decent amount in our league, given the power, the lineup, really everything. That's really all I have. He did. Nick said it the best. Like, you kind of know what Charlie's going to do. So I think overall he was true to his strategy. A couple of those guys, you maybe want for a couple dollars less, but I think overall he did a really good job following his typical strategy.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think Kyle's right that Bogart's probably at cost, but I think it's good to see Charlie get a guy who's not like a fourth or fifth tier guy at cost. I love that for him. I also do really like Manzardo at $1, just because he's probably going to hit there. Presuming he starts okay. If he starts terribly, he might move down, but I like him early on. And I actually didn't love it at the time, but it's aging beautifully for you. Sugano has become kind of a trendy guy. That was an excellent pick for $1. So that's my favorite ones of it. If I was going to pick some ones I didn't love quite as much. See, I was going to say Semien, but it's hard to be like, do you want $35 Semien or $29 Ozzy Albies? I don't know. Like, I think Semien's probably fine. I think the best thing about who Charlie is and how Charlie drafts is you won't find a bunch of massive overpays. You just won't. And I think he has a few picks I kind of like and not many picks I'm angry about. Like, I don't think there's anybody here who I think is more than $2 or $3 or $4 more than I would have paid, personally. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, to be a bit contrarian there, I actually love the Semien pick at $35, and he was someone going into it that I had my eyes on. It just didn't work out for me to go after him. So kudos to Charlie for grabbing him. I love the $8 Luzardo, mostly because he's been someone who's been on my team for like the last 4 years, and just all the potential in the world, can't stop walking guys or getting hurt. So best of luck to you, Charlie, especially at $8. Hope he pans out for you. And then everyone loves the prospects. The Chase Dollander pick was solid, and hopefully he turns into something. But yeah, I don't think he had the best draft, but he definitely did not have the worst draft and didn't overpay for anybody. by more than $1 or $2.
Yeah. And you're right, Mark. Sorry if I was unclear, Charlie. I'm not really roasting you for Semien. I'm mostly just cheersing how good the pick of Albies was. I think Semien for me was like a $33 or $34 player. It's definitely a fine buy. So,
Yeah.
As we expected, Charlie is solid. All right.
Who's next?
You know who's next.
Is it Brad time?
It is Brad time.
It's Brad o'clock, and the goose is going to bend over.
Oh no, I'm stuck in the couch.
What do you step, Brad? All right, so I think Kyle went first. Mark, you've known Brad longer than Kyle. Actually, that probably isn't true. Never mind.
Nope, that's not true.
Mark, you're newer to Brad than Kyle is. What do you think about Brad?
I feel like Brad was about 5 minutes late to the draft and then was like, oh yeah, the draft's going on. I need to go get my guys no matter what they cost. And so like Castillo for $41, I actually don't hate, just because at that point he probably was the second best pitcher off the board, but like that just feels like the most Brad thing ever, so it's kind of boring.
Plus, money no object to him. That's why.
That is very true. Had it been announced that Cole was having surgery at that point? I don't think so, right? It was just that his elbow hurt.
Here's the time for the favorite Brad story of the whole thing. Because I saw Brad a couple days ago. We were hanging out. Brad told me, and for just first before I tell the story, the situation with Cole was he came out of a start on Friday and was getting looked at, and then he said, I'm going to get a second opinion, which sounds terrible because it usually is, and it was here. But Cole said the same thing last year. That's when we had Cole. Cole said, I'm going to get a second opinion. He missed a third or half the year, and then he actually was close to Garrett Cole when he came back. He was dominant in the postseason, and he was still an above-average starter in the second half. So there was no reason to think it was definitely a death sentence. I was pessimistic. I think most people were probably pessimistic. 15 isn't a terrible price, the same way kind of Grayson. I think 13 isn't terrible, but it's more than I want to spend too. But I asked Brad about it. I was like, so Brad, you're just like, hey, I'm going to see what I can do as far as like just securing extra value. I'll take a chance on Cole at 15. And if he stays, amazing. If he's hurt, oh well, I risked it. And Brad goes, oh, when the auction happened, I thought it was fine. I was like, these idiots let Cole get away for 15. But then I immediately was like, oh, fuck, what happened to Cole?
That's very Brad.
So sorry. Like, shit. So, unfortunately, Brad didn't even look at the news from Friday night and did not know Cole was hurt. And just thought we, for some reason, all were really low on Cole as a room. So that's your $15, I guess, tax for not knowing about his injury. It still could have worked out. It didn't work out perfectly, unfortunately.
Yeah. But looking at his draft, like knowing who he had kept going in, I feel like Brad could have gone either one of two ways and saying, I'm going to spend all my money on like 3 guys and then really try to go for it. And if it's not working out by like May 15th, blow it all up. Or he could have just tried to get all value. I feel like he's kind of like just looking at his draft. There's no one who's like, oh my God, that was a phenomenal pick that'll set it up for great keeper value going forward, other than maybe Basayo. But he didn't really spend on any of the studs either. So I feel like it just kind of leaves him in no man's land right now. But Brad, another fun Brad story, the week of the draft on Monday, he drove up to my house at 8 a.m. and helped me take a couch to the dump. So I'm going to give Brad a B for his draft and say that he's in the middle of the pack right now, pushing the money.
So motion to just give Brad back $15 and cut Garrett Cole then, because you all love Brad.
Second.
Yeah. I think Brad had a very average draft. I think Mountcastle was a target. $9 was fair for him. I think Yelich was a target. If I hadn't gotten Trey Turner, I almost kept him. I think Yelich is right around a mid-30s player, and he seems healthy finally, so that's great to see. I think probably my least favorite buy on the hitting side is Kowser, which I don't think 25 is terrible, but I didn't love that one personally. I agree with Mark that Basayo was excellent as far as like, not only did you get one of the elite tier keepers probably, and someone who's probably up this year, You also got him at $1 as opposed to 2 or 3 like some of the other ones. Good job there, Brad.
Mhm.
On the pitching staff, I don't have a ton of strong opinions. I think he had okay players. I like Clay Holmes a lot, and I think 14's not indefensible. It just sucks because you didn't get him for like, if he'd gone later, you get him for like 7 or something, and then you might have a chance to keep him even. But I think Brad's in an okay spot. I was really low on Brad before we did the draft. I think I'm higher now than I was then, but I still don't really put Brad in the top half personally. Oh, I'm sorry, Kyle. I didn't even ask. What do you think, Kyle? I apologize.
No, you're good. I was a lot higher on Brad before the draft than you were. But I think I'll be like slightly more aggressive, Brad. I'm sorry. I feel like it was kind of a tough draft overall. I think there's a good portion of the draft where you had, a lot of money. And I think, it was probably just, like busy, like Mark said, maybe missed the first few minutes. But to give Brad some credit, I do think you're maybe a little bit lower than I had you after coming out of the draft. But to give you credit, some players that Nick and Mark have not discussed, I thought that Newt Bar at $3 was a really fun and interesting buy. I still like Newt Bar a lot. He hasn't really been healthy, but I still do think that there's a lot of promise there. And it's not like he went out and spent a lot on him. So if things don't work out, you can cut him easily. I will also say 2 players, clearly is, still like very much paying attention and making really savvy moves, because I think Luis Angel Acuna should have been owned. I don't really understand. I wanted to try to pick him up. I have a lot of prospects, but he definitely has a job to start the year with the injury to McNeil. So, I think that's a great buy. I think he played really well late in the season last year when he came up. I know he had struggles in AAA, but I think there's a great profile there. There's speed. I think there might be more power than people expect. So I love it. And then I'll also say, like, slightly, under the radar as well, Bubic. 2 years ago, before his injury, he was really playing well. He was actually a pretty high prospect, so there is some pedigree there. And he's good. He's been playing pretty well overall in spring. Last year, he was just used as a kind of relief guy, and again, did really well. I think he'll be, a starter this year, and I think he'll be a really good value overall.
Good calls, Kyle. I actually agree with those boys. Good points.
Yeah.
We done with Brad?
Never.
I can't quit him. I also can't leave his team. I physically can't. There we go. All right. Just like we all thought, Zach is in the bottom 3.
That's what he gets for ranking me 13th to start the year. Although he was right, so I guess I should shut up.
He's exactly right. Okay.
Yeah.
Nailed it.
That backfired.
I should not have ranked Mark high.
I can jump in with a couple of thoughts just because I have this team up. But
yeah, go
Zach had a couple of really fun buys that I think at the time were maybe boring to some, but I think really good. So Nolan Gorman for $3, that fits into the same category where, hey, if boppers don't bop, just cut them, be done with them. So great buy there. Soderstrom was a target for me, not only because of the fun catcher stuff, which apparently we were all in tune on, but Soderstrom is a guy with pedigree, and under the hood, I think he looks really good. So I am super excited by Soderstrom. I think not only if he gets catcher eligibility, but even if he stays at first base for whatever reason, I love him. I think he's a great value. In hindsight, honestly, regret not being more in on him. I should have continued to bid. So I think $7 is really good, even though that's probably close to par value or maybe slightly above. Nolan Arenado at $9. I don't know who that guy is. Arenado, who is that? But $9, I actually think is one of the better buys of the entire draft. He's improved his bat speed. He's only 33 years old, and here we are drafting, 34, 35-year-olds, much, much higher, and they're retaining value. I still think there's a chance that Arenado gets traded. So his value will likely only improve if he does. So yeah, I think he deserves some credit there. Walker was my big target, $11. Maybe a little high, but go get your guy because Walker is still 20 years old. Those are my big call-outs.
For a guy who lives on the West Coast and is from the East Coast, I guess he met in the middle. He has a ton of players from the AL and NL Central. Like, you go down the list here, like Gorman, Central, Ellie, Central, Arenado, Central, Bobby Witt, Central, Robert, Central, Walker, Central, Meadows, Central. Like, that's half of his offense is just in the Central. So what do you think, Mark?
I love all the hitting buys. Chapman at 23. I feel like I owned him from like the middle of May all the way through the end of the year last year, and I didn't even realize what a great second half of the year he was having. So if he continues that, I think 23 is a great price for him. Jung-Ho Lee is someone who I had been looking at going into the draft. $9 just wasn't in the cards for me, but I think that's a good buy. I know he's hurt right now. And then there's one other hitter that I wanted to call out. Love the Jock Peterson for $7. I feel like he's someone who no one ever really thinks about, but he's going to play against all the righties in a great Texas lineup. And if he's anything like he was last year, he'll return that $7. Looking at the pitching, the starters, with Kirby getting hurt, the starters scare me a little bit. Just having Gallen be an ace is good, but I feel like it's a little bit thin right now. So leaving the draft, I would have said great draft. I don't necessarily love his team as much as I thought I would, just looking at the pitching, but with having 3 first-round hitters on your team, I feel like he's going to be just fine, and we'll end up making a move to probably add another starter, find somebody on the waiver wire, and it won't affect him as much as I'm probably thinking it will. Those are my thoughts on Zach's team.
Yeah, I had Zach as a top 4 team and still definitely agree with that. I liked Puck. I know 9's a lot to pay, but I think Puck's going to have at least a 30-40% chance to get some saves and maybe more than half the saves. Mark's right about Peterson. I think even more so. That was somebody, if I'd had more than like $5 at that point. In a daily format, he is drastically undervalued. I mean, he is a god in OPS. And if you can play him against just righties, he's probably the biggest like value shift. Agree with you about Jung-Hoo Lee. Kyle's right about Arenado. That's one where just the way the draft fell, I didn't have the money then. I had him as like a $12 or $13 player. And Arenado's case of outcomes, I feel like, is amazing because he's either going to be just fine hitting 4th in St. Louis, or he does get traded, and he's probably getting traded somewhere amazing. So that's amazing too. And the only other one you guys didn't mention is, even though I think Soderstrom's going to get catcher eligibility maybe back, I think Wells at $1 is great. He's probably going to lead off for the Yankees. I think the $1 Austin Wells is a really solid catcher buy. Catchers are easy to get, but you may have a catcher that scores 90 runs and hits for an okay average with some decent pop, and I like that for you. So I had Zach as like a top 4 team. I still think it's a top 4 team, but I wouldn't say he moved up or down for me.
Interesting. I think his draft was sneaky good, and Mark called out Chapman. Just one other thing, Chapman, like Bat X, $27 in our league.
Yep.
So how many $20 players in the $20 range outside of Ozzy came at that type of discount in our league? Because you got to work in inflation. So just straight from Bat X, 27.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, Kyle. Chapman, I think, when I looked at Ozzy, is not quite 12 or 13, whatever Ozzy is. I think he's like 9. He's one of the ones that actually is close. Definitely really great.
Yeah. Good buy. Yeah, and good call, Mark.
Thanks.
Good team, Zach.
Yeah, good team. Good team.
Good team, stay good. I'm going to take the over on Zach finishing in 12th.
Yeah.
Who's this guy down here at 13?
Eminem. Mark.
Embarrassing. Terrible.
Oh, yeah, the Marks are at the bottom. The Knicks are at the top.
It won't last.
It can't stay like this, I'm sure. I agree with that. All right, Kyle, you're not a Mark. What do you think of Mark's draft?
I wish I could say something else because I don't want to, just slobber all over you.
No, tell me how great I am.
I really liked your draft. I thought it was great to go out and buy guys like Freeman. Yeah, obviously the injuries is kind of odd and concerning, but I really liked a lot of the guys you targeted. I thought Morel was maybe a little expensive in my opinion, but I mean Machado and Freeman, I think where you got them, to be honest, it's kind of crazy. I think all the top level guys should have gone more than they did, and I think it is because some of the players with extra money just weren't as aggressive as maybe they should have been. So I do think we got better values than we should have. So fantastic buys, especially Machado. Kurtz, I really like. I kind of wanted to keep him. I think he's exciting. So obviously having him for $1 is a lot more beneficial. And I like a lot of the pickups you've done since the draft ended, like Spencer Jones.
Yep.
And let's just see. Like I think there's a good chance he plays a lot this year. And even Zach Veen too. I think he'll play a lot this year. So, and honestly, the boring one is Springer for $6. I think that's a really good buy too. So
yeah, if he leads off, it's great.
I think
two of the
draft.
guys you mentioned were drafted by Raymond.
Horman.
Well, sorry,
but I appreciate it.
But not Freeman and Machado. Those are my two favorites.
Yeah.
And
that's stars and scrubs, baby.
As far as actual like good players going for under 2, I mean Machado definitely went for under. He was probably like a low 50s player, so that was a great buy, Mark. And I also love what you did getting the catcher platoon of Murphy and Baldwin, one of the top 2 or 3 lineups in baseball. One of them's going to become the starter in 2 months. Until then, you get better. I don't like carrying 2 catchers, but I think it's one of the scenarios where it makes some sense. And Veen, on top of what Kyle just said, he's going to break camp. I had a claim in today for rushing. If I didn't get rushing, I wanted Veen. I think it was smart getting Veen.
Mm-hmm.
It sucks Freeman's gone the way it's gone so far because it makes it look worse than it is. I actually liked that one too when it happened. I don't want to be revisionist now. I liked Freeman at 70 when you bought him at 70. I thought it was a little bit of an overpay, but he was the best first baseman there.
Yep.
And then with your pitchers, Verlander for $1 is my favorite one. I think Verlander's going to have way more than $1 in value. And if he doesn't have $1 in value, you can cut him pretty easily.
Yep.
I think you have an above average pitching staff. Not one of my favorite ones, but definitely my top 5 or 6 pitching staffs. What do you think, though? How did it go for you? Are you happy with the way it turned out?
You Darvish, too.
Yeah.
You Darvish for $2 is good.
Yeah, so going into it, I knew that I didn't want to spend any money on pitching outside of $1 or $2 guys. So I was able to really stick to that, and I didn't spend anything more than $2 on any of the pitchers. Darvish, Cano, Martin, Verlander. I drafted Singer for $1, but I ended up trading him. And then I was really torn between trying to decide, do I want to go and just blow all the money that I have on whatever the best hitters are, or do I want to try and stay patient and see if I can pick off value? But then seeing Ramirez go for 75 and knowing it was like Freeman and someone else above Machado at that point, I was like, you know what? Ramirez went for a lot less than I thought he would, and if I can get Freeman in for less than that, then I'll be happy with it. So that's kind of how I ended up taking the stars and scrubs approach there. I appreciate you guys applauding the Machado buy, but I didn't actually intend to buy him. Nick, I believe you were the one who was also kind of just bidding him up and clicking, going dollar for dollar with me. But
yeah.
I think I can't remember what your max bid was. I thought it was something a little bit above 50, and I just assumed you were going to take it up to that, and then I was going to just back out and let someone else get him. So I'm not upset I got him for 45, but once that happened, I was pretty much done for the night, and I was like, all right, it's just all $1 guys.
It was after.
Yeah.
I think my max bid was like $46.
Yeah. So I should have been paying a little bit more attention on that, but I'm not extremely frustrated about the way it went. I didn't love my hitting coming out of the draft, but then trading for Morrell and Springer, I think made my team better than it was when I left the draft. Really annoyed that Freeman didn't play. I woke up yesterday morning and immediately grabbed my phone to see what was going on in the game. And I looked at the box score. It was like Freeman 0 for 0. And I was like, oh, okay, he's probably walked twice, like classic Freddie Freeman. And then I opened Fantrax and saw the stupid red flag next to his name. I was like, what the fuck? Like, what is going on? Yeah, so I like my team. I think I'm higher than the 11, 12 range that I was being ranked in before the draft. I think maybe like 7 or 8 right now.
That's the best thing. Mark's right. So, Kyle, you had Mark lower than me. Do you agree with me now that Mark is better than you thought originally?
Yeah, I
Nice.
think so. I like your. I also said that Mark has one of the best pitching in the league, which I think you disagree with. I like your pitching more than.
I just said it was like 5th or 6th, I thought.
I think
Didn't
it's
I
good.
just say I liked it?
You
Yeah.
said you liked it. You said it wasn't your favorite.
The Machado story is funny because I think it's one of the best buys in the whole draft. And then
Yeah.
that's funny. I didn't realize that you didn't draft Morrell. Okay, so
Yeah. I
Good point.
traded for Morrell, which we can get into the transactions after the last team. But just to your point about the one,
Mark.
huh?
How high would you have gone on Machado? Because if I hadn't bought Treya, I probably would have taken him into the low 50s.
I again look when we were in the auction, I remember trying to sneak a peek as the timer was going down at what your max bid was, and I thought I saw $50. And just knowing how doing so many auction drafts with you, I just figured you were like, all right, I know I'm not going to buy him, but I'm going to take him up to my max bid, knowing someone else is going to click that $1. And so but I clearly misread it, and you could only go to 46 or 45 or whatever. So I was like, that's how it went down. But yeah, and then on the 2 catcher thing, like Kyle had wanted Soderstrom. He was someone I was also looking at, and that didn't work out. And then at that point, I knew that Murphy had already cracked his rib and just waiting for him to get placed on the IL. I hope Baldwin pans out, but like to your point, Murphy should hopefully come back sometime in May and got what could potentially be a top 7 catcher maybe in that lineup for $1. So
Yeah.
and if it doesn't work out, just cut them both and move on. But yeah, I like my team a lot more after the draft and after a couple of moves, but still have some work to do.
Well said. All right, so it sucks you're 13th. I get it's not fun, but you are still the better Mark. Just like a 3rd versus 4th, I'm the better Nick. Good for us, Mark. All right. So, Mark, you can go first because we had you go last for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I know he's another Mark. What do you think about Mark's team?
Interesting draft. Looking at it, I know he really wanted Hader for $30 is a lot, but having a stud closer or hopefully stud closer could go a long way. I love Adolis Garcia at $20. I know that not a lot of people are high on him this year after everything that he went through last year and some of the numbers that he put up, and going deeper into the advanced metrics or stats, whatever you want to call them. I think he's just kind of due for a rebound. Like, I know he's 30, 31 at this point, something like that, but I just don't think that he has evaporated. I don't think his skill set is completely evaporated. I don't think he's going to steal bases, but I think the power is still there, and I don't think he's going to hit for as low of an average. Arosa Rainey at 33 is a lot. He's someone who I also liked going into the draft, but I don't know if I would have gone that high on him. But then there was a fun little moment in the draft. Alan Roden, who's been a kind of like a prospect for the Jays, who their general manager came out and was just raving about. I had thrown him up there for $1, and Mark almost fell out of his seat when he saw that someone else knew who he was. So he went and got his guy. and hopefully he breaks camp for the Jays, but I don't know if that's going to happen. But yeah, not a great draft, not a terrible draft. Give him a C maybe.
Yeah, it's funny with Roden. I feel like me and Griffin are pretty plugged in, and me and Griffin had beers with him like 3 weeks ago. He was like, guys, here's my target in the minor league spot. I want Alan Roden. And me and Griffin were like, who the fuck is that? Like, is that even a real player? And then, not even a week later, like, Saris likes him, Scott White brings him up. Like, every podcast is talking about this dude. And every time I would text to him and Griffin and be like, Mark, your sleeper, they're going to get it. He was like, don't tell the guys. God bless him.
I think Roden's going to make the opening day.
I think he's
roster.
Yeah.
I hope he does. Mark deserves to be rewarded for being the first to the Alan Roden train.
He's a guy.
I did not know who that was during the draft, but I think Miz had a really good target. I think Roden's really good. So good job there. I think I like Miz's team a lot more than other people. I think guys like Randy Rosarena, I get it. I think guys like Adolis Garcia, Mark said it beautifully. I get it. I get why you're afraid of these guys, and they do belong on a team together. I think that's funny. But yeah, they're. I think they're actually, all those middling players are tough. But like, what did Brian Reynolds go for? He went for like more than $40, I think.
Brian Reynolds went for 47 or 43, one of those two.
So I think this is great. I think it's a really good value, and I think Bregman might be even better at 37. I really like that.
One I really liked.
So sure, and you have a Yankee Goldschmidt for 21. Throw that in there, but I really like Bregman a lot. I like some of these middling, accumulating players. I think if you look at the rest of his team, he has a lot of really high-level talent that goes under the radar. I think Rooker fits the bill there. I think the Martian, Jason Dominguez, if he hits, he fits the bill. Luis Garcia, if he can recreate some of the magic. Xavier Edwards, I think he has a really strong team overall with just a lot of strength. And we haven't even talked about Kerry Carpenter. I know those are all keepers, but I think he has a better team than maybe we give him credit for. I'll give Mark one piece of advice, not that you need it, but I think you have cornered the market a little bit from a relief pitching perspective. So I think, $30 might be a lot for Hader, but I think he now has a unique opportunity to really, not use many of his spots on relief pitchers while still being one of the top performers. So what I would do if I were in your shoes, I would probably trade or get rid of Hunter Gaddis, and I would probably get rid of or trade one or two of your hitters that you don't like. And I would try to use the majority of my bench spots on pitchers, and particularly streaming pitchers. This gives you more flexibility to use as many starting pitchers early in the season as possible, while still tracking at a really high level with your relief pitching, because you got to know that Edwin Diaz, Josh Hader, if they still stay healthy, they're two of the best relief pitchers in baseball with our format. And then, believe it or not, if Strom is healthy, if he can do what he's done in the past, I think that's an extremely valuable pitcher to have as well. And you just keep the three of them in your lineup, but you can go through a lot of other pitching streaming while all of your lineup is good. Like I like King, I like Gosman, I like Fried, Fetty's underrated. But I don't know if what I'm saying makes sense, but I think he's in a unique position with the relief pitchers he has to do something kind of a streaming rotation to use all those bench spots really effectively.
No, I think that's smart. And I think, especially because he's in last place, it makes sense we should all help him. I think even, Mark, if you want to take a less hands-on approach, because what Kyle said makes sense to me. If you even want to kind of play more cautiously, you were the perfect guy, if it's not going your way for the first 2 months, to hit up Eric and be like, Eric, I want someone good. Here's Josh Hader. Here's Edwin Diaz. Because you also have, some of Mark's best buys. I think the $1 Romano, a presumed closer,
great.
There might be keeper value there if he actually holds the job all year. I don't want to keep the bad closers, but $6 if he's not bad, I might keep him. And I actually love, too, his pitching staff was okay going in with the core of King and Fried, but Merrill Kelly at $1 in our format, that's one of those kind of like globby guys who is a great $1 pitcher. I liked Mark kind of middle of the pack when the draft started. I think he's one of the ones who was a spot or two up for me. He's kind of a fringe money guy now. I think Kyle said it great about Annalise and Randy, where they just belong together. I probably would have personally only taken one of them, but I think Annalise is probably a little bit of a deal there, which I know is kind of crazy as bad as he was last year, but just Texas' lineup, and I know he's 32. I know he wasn't great last year, but he's not been bad before that the last 4 years, and I think it's a likely outcome. He's a little bit better, and just if he's a little bit better, he might have 100 RBIs, and then you have a great middle of the lineup guy. To me, Mark did an okay job, a little bit above average job. I'd give him a high B, mid B. Bregman, like Kyle said too, I don't want to repeat everything. I wanted Bregman, just had no money at that point. I almost kept Bregman. I think it's great there. Boston's an excellent landing spot for him. So you're right, like other Mark, where I think you're fringe money-ish. Good job, Mark.
You're right about Jordan Romano. I forgot to mention him, but I kind of meant to include him. I think he's going to get a lot of saves. So Diaz, Hader,
the point about you have the market corner on saves. I think you're right about that.
Romano, and then Strom will steal a bunch of wins and just get good stats if he's healthy. If he's not healthy, you can get rid of him. But
I don't think anybody else has 3 likely closers, much less 2 of the top 5, the way he has Hader and Diaz.
Exactly.
Remember, he ripped me off. I had Diaz for $1 2 years ago, and he gave me some scrub who was a lot of money to get Diaz. I got wrong there. I remember Kyle at the time thought so.
So, Mark, if you use the Knicks strategy and sell your closers, a couple months in, I think that's a great strategy. But get your value. These are good players. So, get some good players in return.
And just to clarify too, I think I would do what Kyle's saying. I'm just saying if it doesn't, you don't an offer you are looking for, something like that, you want to try it first. I just think you're one of the best guys possible to hit up an Eric or someone like that who we talked about has limited saves, and you have a chance to make a good move at the midway point if you want to.
It's funny you're saying all this because I think these are the 2 pitching builds that are the most fun, in my opinion. Eric's and Mark's, the 2 complete opposite.
Well, unfortunately, Eric's is working better 2 days in.
He has all the illusions.
Good job, guys. Is there anything we didn't touch on already you guys want to tell you about the draft? It's hard not to think we hit everything just because we looked at every roster, but overall experience as far as runs, I think we all kind of agree the studs went for a little bit too little, and then the mid-tier maybe went Brian Reynolds types a little bit too high. But overall, I was pleasantly surprised. I thought there'd be guys going in the high 80s, and I wish I'd had a little bit more money to buy something like Trey Turner a second time.
I agree. I don't have much to add. I think I was shocked by the top end value. I regret not having a little bit more detail put together on the $1 guys that I really wanted. Shane Bieber went for more than $1. I then splurged in the waivers on Musgrove. So many guys, I didn't need to throw Camille Duvall out for $1 during the auction. I didn't need to throw out Hudson, who retired from baseball, for $1, right? if you're gonna go stars and scrubs like I did, probably have a couple more scrubs lined up. Some of the scrubs that I lined up, I think everyone liked. They went for more than $1.
Yeah.
So that's really the big lesson that I learned from the draft.
Kyle, we will do free agents maybe, just because we're already gone almost 2 hours, but I loved Musgrove. That was my favorite one I was going to bring up. I had, I think, a $12 bid on him. I thought I was for sure get him. What'd you bid on Musgrove?
35.
Okay, yeah, you cooked me there. He was the layup this year as far as my whole strategy last year was get Kershaw, get Woodruff, get Sandy, take those guys who a year later will be definitely valuable. I think there's almost no chance Musgrove, even though he wasn't great last year, he was still fine. And before that, he was a stud a couple times. I think he's almost a guaranteed keeper at $6. And I love that. And like you said, Kyle, we all do it too. I had Savale and a couple other guys get just nominated when I was talking to someone. And I was like, I don't want this guy for $1, even though he's fine. I want fucking Musgrove.
Yeah, man, I had one too many sours because I had Musgrove written down lower on my Google sheet. But I was just let me get these borderline ownable pitchers out there. Someone will bid another $1 on them. It's too cute. I don't know. So could have saved some waiver money there. Some fab. What about you, Mark? What was your big takeaway from the draft?
No notes.
Too many pitchers going. Who the fuck's this guy?
No, I mean, I think we already touched on it. Some of those mid-tier guys did go a little bit more, but like in being the one who came on in the post-draft pod last year, I felt like for every roster we talked about, like, man, I think this guy went for way too much. I think that guy went for way too much. Other than like 3 or 4 guys in the 2 hours that we've been talking so far, I really didn't feel like there were any like super egregious, like, I can't believe someone like that went for $33 or like I know for a fact last year we were talking about George Springer going for like 40 plus bucks. And I just feel like, I don't know if everyone is getting wiser or, understanding how the values are going to play out a little bit better now that there isn't as much turnover and we've been doing this together for so many leagues. But I feel like everyone's getting a lot smarter on how to spend their money when it comes to the draft. So kudos to everybody in the league. And I think it makes for a more competitive league too, because I think the rosters find a way of evening out.
You're right.
No, well said, Mark. I agree with you. I think since we've become an auction league 8 years ago is my favorite as far as like no one really overspending too much. There are obviously overspends, and there always will be. It's the nature of the beast. But this was not a year where like 8, 10, 12, 15 guys went for like 12, 15 bucks more than they should have. What's going on?
Oh, I don't know. No, you're looking at my team. That's fine. Like even the guys that went for $9, $12, like none of them stood out to me and being like, man, I can't believe he spent $12 on that guy or anything like that.
It just keeps spinning. I haven't clicked anything. I'm trying to go to the trades.
I can try and share my screen if you want.
I know we are probably running low on time and need to talk trades, but one thing I also learned is that
I'm refreshing.
I thought that Sagano was a draft pick also, but it looks like Charlie got Sagano actually right after the draft via Fab for $20. So that was a good pickup. And Nick, similarly, I wasn't super in on Sagano. I like him way more now than I did like a week ago. So
yeah, the velo's up. The results have been great. Good job, Charlie. Yeah. And that's my mistake too. I thought he was a draft pick.
Same thing with Soriano. Jose Soriano should have been picked in the draft. What's that?
Can one of you try to share? I don't know what's going on. I'm going to unshare and try to reshare again if you don't want to.
I just tried. Let me know if you can see mine.
I can see it.
Yes, please be in charge.
Cool.
All right, you steer.
That's dangerous. You want that behind the wheel?
I do want that behind the wheel because I can't control my screen anymore.
All right. Well,
I'm still on your team.
I think the last trade you guys touched on was the blockbuster of Luis Gil and Kobe Mayo, right?
I don't think we did that one, did we?
No, that happened like right before the draft, but
yeah. Okay, so Luis Gil and Mayo, that is a blockbuster. What did you think, Mark? Did you like it?
I didn't even give it a second thought at that point, to be honest. I mean, knowing what we know now, I guess Griffin came out ahead. Even though Mayo got sent to the minors, he's still probably gonna return more value than Gil. But Mayo is still on Griffin's team, but Raymond doesn't have Gil anymore. So yeah, good job, Griffin.
What about you, Kyle?
I don't have much to say. I thought maybe it was like a cap move because whoever the cheaper player is, you could just cut them before the draft and then save money. Like, yeah, I don't know. Then that side would win. I think both were above what you'd want to spend. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think I agree with you entirely. That's what I was going to say is they're probably both guys I wouldn't have kept at cost, especially once you found out about Gil's injury. Before the Gil injury, I would have kept him, of course, but we knew at that point he's going to miss a few months, and I probably would have cut both. So I actually will lean Raymond there just because, I mean, Mayo's definitely got the better chance to give Griffin value in the long run, but I don't know, man. I mean, it's cheaper to cut. I would have cut both. Another blockbuster right after that, too. Rhys Hoskins and Luke Raley. It's basically a Hearn for Raley, which is an annual trade we make here.
Yeah. Yeah,
Kyle, you first this time.
I'll take the Raley side. I don't know. I think is kind of underrated. You showcased some of his stats from last year earlier in the pod. Hoskins has some elite power. We'll see if he can really get back to it. I'll take Raley.
What about you, Mark?
Yeah, I don't hate that Hoskins is $1, but I just think the fact that Rayleigh is also $1 and offers a little bit more upside in terms of his skill set. It's not a landslide either way, but I do think I'd rather have the Rayleigh side at this point.
A good clean sweep. I think it's fine, but I prefer Rayleigh. Completely defensible though on both sides. 248 kind of deal there.
Excuse me.
All right, we got one. Mark's involved in there now. So this is Markman. This is George Springer and Morel for Andres Munoz. Kyle, you're not Mark. What do you think about Mark's trade?
Yeah, so this helps a little bit. I missed that the Morel was in a trade. I think Mark kind of highlighted that he was underwhelmed by his hitting, so I think it makes sense that he would do this. I think Munoz is a player that I'm really excited by this year. I think I heard he added a pitch in the offseason. So if he can stay healthy, I think he has a really good chance of being a top 5, maybe top 3 closer in all of baseball. So yeah, that's pretty exciting. At the same time, he does get hurt. Pitchers get hurt. I kind of like buying hitters, especially if it fits your team. I think this is pretty even overall. I'll give it to you, Mark, just because I do like Springer this year. But I think it's close, and it's just more about like fitting the need.
Yeah, I think it's pretty even. I also probably generally prefer that. I think Munoz is close to one of the elite closers, not quite there. And I think he's like 16-ish bucks, like that.
Yep.
So you might have, if you want to value keepers or value pitchers a lot, relievers next year keep. You're probably not keeping Morel or Springer, but I like them probably slightly more this year, personally. It's an interesting philosophical thing, too. I've talked with Griffin a few times about this, where I think generally going from saves plus holds to saves times 2 plus holds, I am more than he is lower on the closers and still willing to pay a little bit for the best relievers. But I think it makes sense. Raymond's team build, I think he should have probably gone for a closer. And I think with Mark's hitting, he wanted to improve. It makes sense too. I can't really critique either of you too much. Was this you, Mark, or was this Raymond? Who came to who?
I think Raymond had put up on his trade block that he was looking for closers at that point, and like Kyle had already mentioned, that I'd said I wanted to try and get some more bats, and so I was hoping to try and offload like Chris Martin onto him just for a 1-for-1, like one of his bench bats. But he was more interested in trying to go after Williams or Munoz, which I don't blame him for. And it certainly hurt giving up Munoz just because I loved having 2 stud relievers, 2 stud closers that I just did not have to worry about at all, because I feel like one area that I'm not great in is streaming relievers. I feel like I'm always a day too early or a day too late on whoever the next guy up is, or who, hey, someone's been used 3 days in a row. This guy's going to be the next one to get the save opportunity. But I just felt like I'd have, with that being said, I still felt like I'd have a better chance of finding someone on the waiver wire to kind of piece together what Munoz will end up being, and I just wouldn't be able to pass up the value of getting Morel and Springer. So I think I pushed it a little bit more. I think he said he would originally trade Morel and someone, or like Morel and another bat. And so I think I asked for Springer, assuming he was going to say no, and then we would go back to the negotiations. But the text message was basically like, that's a steep price, but I think I'm willing to do it. Let me think about it. And then like 2 minutes later, he was like, all right, yeah, let's do it. And I was like, cool. Trade proposed and accepted.
Think that's Raymond.
But yeah, it made sense for him. And
by the way, you
liked it.
waited like 6 hours to get a closer back, or a closer-ish back.
Yeah.
So you moved right along. You traded Brady Singer to New Nick for Jason Foley. Kyle, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't want to be like too brazen about it, but I think Mark won the trade. I don't think Singer is really rosterable, in my opinion. I think there's probably like 12 pitchers available right now that I like more than Singer. And I think Foley is a closer, so I think you did really well.
I think you did well, Mark. I am more enticed than Kyle, I think, just based on what he said, than you are on Singer. I think Singer could be good, and I think it makes sense maybe if you're new Nick and you're rebuilding to just try to offload relievers the best you can.
Mm-hmm.
But I do probably lean your side slightly. Was this one you proposed, or was it one that got offered to you?
I proposed this.
Right?
I proposed this one pretty shortly after I made the trade with Raymond, just starting to look around the league and who had a lot of closers, who I thought I might be able to send a starting pitcher to, because like I don't hate Brady Singer. I don't love Brady Singer. He was never someone who I like factored into having on my team going into the draft. I nominated him for $1, assuming he would go for more than that, and no one bid him up. So like I wasn't mad that I got him, but I knew like to Kyle's point, he was probably going to be the first pitcher that I cut for whoever I could get on the wire. But I think it was the perfect move for my team and for the other Nick in the league. Like take a shot on the 28-year-old starting pitcher who cost $1. He was good in the second half of last year. So, it sucks that he got traded to Cincinnati. If he had stayed in Kansas City, I might have kept him for the $6 that he would have cost before the draft. But I hope he pans out for Nick. But once I gave up Munoz, I wanted to have another closer in the mix, just because I didn't want to have to really scramble every day looking at the waiver wire for who might be the next closer in, Miami or wherever there is an unsettled situation. Now, with that being said, Foley's not a lockdown sure thing, but it made me feel a little bit better.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I will say, too, I'm sure it was your plan. I think probably the two moves in concert I like for you. I think it makes sense generally on both sides. Good call out, too. I don't love going to Cincinnati for Singer, but I do think I'm higher than either of you are. But even with that said, he's not someone who's more than like my second or third bat off the bench. Or my second or third arm off the bench.
Yep.
So, but New Nick took a page out of your book, though, Mark. He was like, Mark made 2 trades. I'm going to make 2 trades. And then he immediately deals Bichette, who the $40 surprise at the auction for Lane Thomas. Kyle, what'd you think of it?
Yeah, I'm probably being a little harsh on the Singer, so I like trying to recalibrate here, but I unfortunately do feel similarly about this one. I think it's a pretty one-sided trade. I will go out on a limb and say I think Lane Thomas was actually a really good buy at $7 in the auction. But I think trading Lane Thomas straight up for Bo Bichette is a really great move by Jack. I think he wins this trade pretty handedly. I actually do like Bo Bichette a good amount. I think $40 was way above the value that I was hoping for, but I think it doesn't really matter. This is a 1-year rental. Let's hope for Nick that, Lane Thomas can get back to his, 2020, like strong power and start stealing again. And all of a sudden Lane Thomas turns into a good keeper for Nick. Maybe that works out for both teams, but I'll say pretty like, I don't know, 80-20, 90-10. I would say Jack.
How about you, Mark? Do you think it was like that, or do you feel like it was a little bit closer, or do you like the other side?
I'd probably go closer, like 60-40 for Papa Spark. But it's funny, before I even proposed the Singer for Foley to Nick, I had reached out asking if he'd be interested in trading the shortstop, specifically Bichette or Tovar. So my dad unfortunately beat me to trying to get Bichette because, like to Kyle's point, the $40 Bichette was just not somebody who should be factored into Nick's team. So I thought I could try and get him for something along the lines of this. And I hadn't really figured out what I was going to try and offer for him. But again, I think it makes sense for Nick to make the move. He could have tried to pry a little bit more away from Team Jack or seeing what other offers maybe have come in, but make the move, and hopefully Thomas turns into something throughout the year and you can keep him going into next year. And then I love the move for my dad he's a rental. And I know everyone in the industry thinks Bichette is done and he's just never going to go back. Like he's not going to be his ceiling from what he was a couple of years ago, but I don't think he's going to be as bad as he was last year either. So I think it's a good swing for the fences move for him.
Yeah. I think, like, if you know what's keepable, it's definitely Lane Thomas. That said, I'm closer to Kyle's lean on it. I think it's pretty, like, of the ones we discussed, it's the most comfortable one where I'd rather have Bichette in the other side of the trade. I had Bichette probably around, I think it was 26 in the auction. So 40 is too much. Again, not keepable. But that said, he was one of my preferred hitters on your team. And I think Kyle and Mark made good points, though, too, that in general, I think he probably could have fished a little bit more. We're also assuming Nick just doesn't love Lane Thomas. I mean, Nick might just know something about Lane Thomas we don't. I'm willing to say that's possible. So we'll see what happens with it. But I think I agree closer to the Kyle side of it. Good job, Jack. Jack also here had a really busy lunch hour just because that was like 11:30. And then at 12:30, he took the Nick and Mark playbook and made a second trade. Another just kind of scrub for scrub here. Marcelo Zuna for Pete Alonso. But Kyle. Mark, you're not Kyle. What do you think of that one?
Yeah, this trade actually really caught me by surprise because I feel like it's not a move that my dad would make in trading like a big name player like Alonso for another big name player like Ozuna. I feel he's really come out of his shell in the league over the last few years. I don't know. I mean, Ozuna was phenomenal last year, and I think I still like the Braves lineup slightly more than the Mets. I don't know if I'm going to stand behind that with the addition of Soto. I'd love to hear more about how this trade actually came to fruition and who messaged who or who proposed what, because I think I'd rather have Alonso, but Ozuna only being $11 might sway me that. Like I'm truly torn on both sides right now. So I'd love to hear like what Kyle's thought process was, if my dad shared any insight on why he wanted Ozuna or was willing to give up Alonso. That may sway me one way or the other, but it's an interesting move for sure.
As a long-time big meat Pete guy, I know Kyle likes the Pete meat. I'm guessing Kyle went for this. Was this you, Kyle?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't a long conversation. Like, to be honest, the main reason I did this move and tried to think of this, we'll see if another trade works out, but I was working on a different trade for another utility player. And so I wanted to get rid of Ozuna to clean that up. Ozuna is a player I really like. I traded for him before the draft. I will go out on a limb and say I also did view Ozuna as a player before the draft who was a nice chip to have at a lower cost. And for someone who was a little cash strapped from my perspective, I thought that was favorable going into the draft to spend up on more expensive players. $7 between Alonso and Ozuna. I am happy with that. I think that worked out pretty well for two players who I would argue are somewhat similar. I think on Jack's side of things, Ozuna is extremely underrated. He was a top 10 hitter in all of baseball, I think 2 years in a row, like in terms of fantasy. Higher than Alonso both the past 2 years. Ozuna also has like more of that possibly extrinsic value of being $11. So, keeping him next year, that's, very likely, even if he takes a step back. I will say, 34 years old, that's, a big reason why I'm trying to maybe sell on him now. After the draft, I was able to take advantage of a little bit of a cheaper player, spend up on others. I view Alonso similarly. I think power is a strength of mine. I think early in the season, I kind of like the idea of making a strength stronger. You can keep your homers, you can bank them. So trade later on and try to figure out something else. So Alonso's a player I've liked for a long time. I'm happy with it. I hope Ozuna continues his, top 10 campaigns and, plays well in a really great lineup. I think it's a close trade. But yeah, I did reach out on that one. And that's kind of the story.
Yeah.